It's week one coming right up for NFL season. That's right. We've got football back. We may not have SoCal college football like USC or UCLA, but we've definitely got some Rams and Chargers football for you folks. I'm the host of Sideline Sports Podcast, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all SoCal sports. And with me today is sports journalist and also works for CBSLA, covers both the Rams and the Chargers himself, Will Hernandez. Will, thank you so much for being on the show. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I'm really excited to talk some NFL. The season's finally here. And, man, let's get to it.
I know you have a lot to talk about as far as both the Rams and the Chargers. We were just talking about how excited you are about this NFL season and just to have some football here in SoCal. But very quickly, folks, we are just around the corner from 200 subscribers. So if you guys can hit the subscribe button down below and give this episode a thumbs up as well, we would definitely appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get started. Will, Rams last season finished off their year third in the NFC West, 9-7, right behind the both very good and very dangerous 49ers and the Seahawks. Now, going into this year with some good acquisitions, I would say, and some very good signees. I mean, the fact that they lost Dante Fowler and Littleton, I think those are some players that are definitely going to affect the defense. But being able to bring back Michael Brockers, how big of an impact is that, being able to bring him back?
Huge move. It was a blessing in disguise, honestly, because I believe Michael Brockers had failed a physical with, I want to say it was the Giants. He signed with some team, and he failed his physical. And so the Rams came in. They had already lost Dante Fowler. They had already lost Corey Littleton. And those are two guys who played huge roles last season, especially Littleton, who, had over 250 tackles the last two seasons combined. He was very, you could rely on him. He started all 16 games the last two seasons. He made plays. And, you had a guy like Dante Fowler who had a career high 11.5 sacks last year for the Rams. And, obviously he has Aaron Donald, he had Michael Brockers, he had Clay Matthews, who was okay, but anytime you have Aaron Donald playing alongside you, you're gonna have an advantage because he takes up 2, sometimes 3 linemen. So that was a big loss, but obviously bringing back Michael Brockers is definitely, his experience, his camaraderie with Donald. That's a huge addition re-signing because, they're running thin on the front seven. The linebacker core, there's not a guy on there, I think, with more than a year of experience. Their D-line is still okay. They got Leonard Floyd as well. And I think they drafted Terrell Lewis, who's hurt. So they were hoping he was going to play a role in the pass rush. But, the Rams defense is definitely going to be that's going to be their make or break group because their offense should be okay. Sean McVay, he's an offensive, he specializes in offense. The Rams have been pretty successful with him, even though the running game struggled last year. McVay, he's a coach. He's not Jeff Fisher. Okay, let's just put it that way.
That's a really big point right there. I mean, Sean McVay is a very good coach, bringing the Rams to the promised land, to the Super Bowl. It was about 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, and they came very close to a Super Bowl championship right there for the Rams. But now looking at the team and, losing Todd Gurley and having to make that cut also with Clay Matthews, I see the Todd Gurley loss as – I see it as an addition. What do you see it as? The reason why I say addition is because I feel as though Todd Gurley was starting to kind of fall off the face of the earth just a little bit as far as not getting enough carries, not getting as many yards as possible in his carries. What do you think?
Well, the Todd Gurley situation it's an interesting one, to say the least, because, he had his first 2 years under McVay, he was incredible. First 3 years, I should put it. first 3 years was incredible. Offensive player of the year. He was, a high candidate for MVP. I believe it was 2017. And even last year, he was not bad. He still had decent numbers. He only rushed for he didn't rush for over 1,000 yards, which he had done the previous 3 years. But he still had 12 touchdowns. He was okay in the passing game. I believe he only had 11 receptions. He didn't have too many. But I have a conspiracy theory that because the moment that everything went downhill for Todd Gurley and the Rams was his whole injury fiasco during their Super Bowl run. I believe it was 2018. Like, the Rams were never really clear about that. And, Todd Gurley obviously never said anything. They said obviously it was the knee injury, or that his knee was banged up, but he played. He was never on the injury report. The Rams were never clear about that. So I have a feeling that Gurley had something over McVay, or they had a weird relationship, because a couple times when I was there, sometimes it kind of looked like McVay was a little stressed. He obviously last year, they're coming off the year where they made the Super Bowl, but you could tell he was a little stressed, and the whole Gurley situation didn't help. He was doing a lot of commercials, more, it seemed like he was really more taking advantage of all the opportunities that living in LA, playing in LA brings you. But, it is somewhat of a loss, because his experience being there, his camaraderie with, maybe with Jared Goff. But, they brought in Cam Akers. They invested a 3rd-round pick, I believe, on him. So they have, they're banking on him to produce. But it's gonna be tough at first. I wouldn't play him for fantasy, only because McVay has come out and said, oh, don't forget about Darrell Henderson. Don't forget about Malcolm Brown. So it's kind of a wait and see to go fantasy-wise, the Rams running backs. But, they're definitely banking on Cam Akers. And he played well, for Florida State. He was, I believe, an ACC Offensive Player of the Year 1 year. So he should, the Rams definitely see him potentially, being a Todd Gurley replacement. When he'll finally be in that role, solidify. I was thinking it was going to be week 1, but now it's looking like it's probably going to be, week 2, week 3, whenever. So, Todd Gurley's going to be a loss a little bit, but I think what you were saying is true. It might be a win, just because, his contract wasn't helping the Rams, and he wasn't producing up to what he's getting paid. He's getting paid Christian McCaffrey money, so, and the Rams are still paying him, but I guess now they have, the roster space to go elsewhere.
Do you think that Akers will be that ideal replacement for Todd Gurley?
I hope so. He has a potential. It scares me a little bit because he kind of looks a little small in what I've seen, some of the B-roll from Rams practice. But, based off, if you go off his college success, you have to think he's going to be there. He's going to be right there. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. So it's not a question of is he going to get enough opportunities? Is McVay going to feed him? McVay's going to feed him. He's going to give him every opportunity. It's just about, can he do it? I think so. The Rams certainly think so. That's why they invested that pick on him. So, they could have easily gone out and get a Leonard Fournette. They could have got Adrian Peterson. They could have got some running back to come in and, be a workhorse, and they didn't. So they started to believe Cam Akers, is the guy. And, I hope he is. The good thing is that all signs point to him being a good pass catcher, viable pass option out of the backfield. And that's huge, especially for, you saw Tom Brady do it so many years, Phillip Rivers, just dump it out to their running backs and be a viable option. And honestly, I think that's Gurley, obviously he was ground to ground, but he was really good in the passing game. Before last season, his first couple of years with McVay, he was a great passing option. So, I think Cam Akers will be good. Will he put up the Todd Gurley numbers that Todd Gurley was playing a couple years ago? Probably not.
Yeah, that Todd Gurley a couple years ago was just unstoppable, and he was absolutely the top running back in the game. So we'll see what kind of successes Akers will have for this coming year. So with the additions that the Rams made this offseason, do you still think that they could keep up with the Seahawks and even the 49ers?
It's going to be tough. I mean, I guess I'm being a little pessimistic. A lot of people tend to think that the Rams are going to, rebound. I think so too. I think their offense is going to be solid. The thing that questions me is their defense. Even though they have Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, their linebacker core is really, really thin, man. But they definitely have it. And, they have two new coordinators, I believe. They have at least one. Brandon Staley taking over for Wade Phillips. That's kind of a wait and see. But I don't know. I mean, I think they have the team to make a run. I think the Niners will have a drop off. Every team does after losing the Super Bowl. I know that sounds kind of cliche-ish, but they had a lot of things go right for them last year, and a lot of guys stayed healthy. They lost some guys on the offensive line. They lost some guys at receiver, and on defense as well. They lost DeForest Buckner, who I think was, he was huge for that defensive line last year. And the Cardinals, I think they'll be okay, but I think the team that's going to, it usually is the Rams and the Seahawks the last couple of years, who have been Seahawks are stacked. So I mean, I think it's wide open, but the Rams, their defense is what concerns me a little bit.
I like to say the NFC West is a pretty exciting division with those three teams. And then, of course, you can never really sleep on the Rams defense. And I still think they're going to have a pretty good defense. Now, switching gears from the defense to the offense, do you think Jared Goff is going to have another one of those years that's going to go uphill? Because it just seems like this youngster is just – he's learning every season, and he's just getting better and better and better. What kind of season do you think Jared Goff would have?
I think Jared Goff should have a pretty good year. He struggled last year due to the run game, and their offensive line was really, really bad last year. They had a lot of injuries, and, Goff, he's a pretty good quarterback when you give him time, and he just wasn't getting a lot of it, and it didn't help that he had a really bad running game, so there was no threat of that to defenses, so they were kind of preparing for that. So I think both will be better, hopefully, this year. I think the offensive line will be a little bit better at the start of the year. Hopefully they could, they don't have too many injuries. Andrew Whitworth is pretty old. He's already 38. He's still a beast, and he's a guy it's still pretty solid. He's a really solid NFL veteran. But I think, a lot of Jared Goff's success will depend on the running game and if their offensive line can protect. So, but he has the weapons, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Robert Woods, a lot of good things. A lot of writers who cover the Rams are saying a lot of good things about Van Jefferson, who is, his dad is a receivers coach for the Jets. And it's in his blood to be good. So, it's already in his blood, like that, playing in the NFL. So, Jared Goff has all, and he still has Sean McVay, him and Sean McVay have been a pretty good pair of coach and quarterback. So, you have to, ultimately it's going to depend on if his offensive line can protect him in a running game. If, they can at least hang on for, 60% of the season, Jared Goff should be in good standings. And I like him this week as a fantasy option. It might be good because chances are it's going to be a shootout, and the Rams are going to have to score, or they're going to score, and Cowboys are going to keep up. So, I like Jared Goff this season. But, again, a lot of it's going to depend on the offensive line play.
I actually like that choice because the O-line for the Rams is something that has really needed to be addressed. If you can't give a guy that's very good in the throwing game and the passing game, then you're going to have some serious problems, especially like a talented quarterback like Jared Goff. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Rams do against the Cowboys. I'm sure there's a lot of fan bases that are going nuts at their home, getting ready to watch this one. So my final question to you, Will, is let's be real. Greg the Leg Zuerlein wasn't exactly the best of kickers last season. Who are they expecting to replace him since Greg the Leg is not going to be there for the Rams?
Yeah, they've had a couple of rookies, to try to test it out. I think we'll probably won't find out till this upcoming week, or probably leading up to. We'll probably actually find out tomorrow, because tomorrow is like when they usually release their injury report. But dropping Greg the Leg was, I would say, a pretty good move, letting him go, because he was getting paid a lot of money for a kicker, and he wasn't that great last year. He only made about, I think, 73% of his field goal attempts. He didn't miss some games. He struggled with injuries. But, obviously he was going to want to get paid good money. And then after what happened last year, the Rams were able to get by with Sam Ficken, who was okay. He was solid. A couple times Zuerlein got hurt. So, it's not too much of a loss. He obviously goes to Dallas, where he'll have a lot of opportunities as well, and he'll be facing the Rams week 1, so that should be good. But, it's kind of a wait and see who they're going to start this year kicker. But, it's not too hard to find a kicker nowadays in the NFL. But the problem is, once the lights come on, that's when, that's when, they separate the guys, the boys from the men.
I definitely think the kickers market is something that does get a little underestimated. As you said, yes, it is easy to find a kicker, but you have to find a guy that can be very consistent in getting the field goals in, and even just getting the extra point in. This is a big deal to get a kicker, because if you miss a field goal, even if it's a short one, that definitely messes up the playbook, and it definitely messes up with the whole entire game plan. So, Will, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Chargers and some of the moves they made, and looks like they just released that it's going to be Tyrod Taylor as their week 1 quarterback. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about their draftee, Justin Herbert, who's supposed to be their future quarterback down the line. So if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all your SoCal sports. We'll be right back.
This is Hector Aguayo, the long snapper for the Santa Ana Dons, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast.
Welcome back to Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, and with me again is sports journalist for CBSLA, Will Hernandez, covering the Rams and the Chargers. First half, we're talking about the Rams, some of the transactions they made, and as far as what their running back situation is going to be and how they're going to use Cam Akers from Florida State, their kicking situation, which reminds me, Will, I know you have an update on the Rams kicking situation.
Yeah, that's right, guys. It looks like it's going to be Sam Sloman. They drafted him out of Miami of Ohio. He was pretty solid in college. I think he was one of the record holders for the MAC. So, he had a couple guys that he had to beat out, but the Rams drafted him in the 7th round, last year's drafts. So, they obviously invested in him. They have a vested interest, and so it should be good. I mean, again, he had a really good college career. So, but, obviously, as kickers are very replaceable. It's unfortunate, but like if you miss, if you miss like more than 2 kicks in consecutive games, you're probably going to be out of a job. So yeah, Sam Sloman will be Greg Zuerlein's replacement.
Something we didn't even talk about, Will, was we need to talk about SoFi Stadium and how that's going to open up. But very unfortunate that the LA public is not going to be able to be inside the stadium and get to check it out. But I know both you and I were able to check out photos and just to see what it's like. What have you seen from that, Will?
SoFi Stadium looks amazing. It looks like, it looks like everything that all the previews, all the, drawings that they put together look like. And when you look at it, and honestly, it looks like a piece of art, like a painting. It looks amazing. They have the huge video board that basically goes around the whole stadium. So, it's unfortunate nobody's going to be able to go to it, at least in 2020, it looks like. But, it looks like a thing of beauty. And obviously, around there, NFL Network's going to move there, in one of the buildings right next to it. I think they're gonna have probably like stores, and there's going to be at Albertsons. There's going to be like a market there, so you could pretty much go get your pregame stuff, get some beers, candy, whatever you want for the game. And it really looks like, and it's going to bring a lot to the, city of Inglewood. Obviously, it's unfortunate because it's probably going to raise taxes, property taxes around there. But yeah, it really looks really, really nice. It's right next to the Forum. The Clipper Stadium is going to be pretty close to there. Their new arena. It's going to be ready like in 2024, 2025. So it looks really, really nice. I mean, I can't wait to go in there. I don't know. What do you think?
Based off of the photos, it just looks like a very gorgeous stadium. It looks very nice. It's a super nice one. One thing that we talked about even before coming on was the lake that they put around it. So that lake, it makes it look a little bit like a castle type of thing. So I think it looks really nice. It's going to be really interesting to see when everything comes back together, all the tailgates, all the fans coming in, all the Rams and the Chargers fans. And I'm just excited to see it in live, to see it in action, and just can't wait to see that coming in. So now we talked about the Rams in the first half, the Chargers. This is another interesting team as well. Phillip Rivers going over to the Colts, signing that deal with them, which left the Chargers quarterbackless until they decided to they made the announcement to get Tyrod Taylor, make him the starting quarterback for the Chargers. And Will, I wanted to ask you, I know, what is Justin Herbert missing to be able to be that starting quarterback for the Chargers?
I think right now it's probably just experience, time. The Chargers obviously, took him first round. He's their quarterback of the future. And, what you could see here this season is what happened to Tyrod Taylor in Cleveland. When he was having a rough game against the Jazz on Thursday Night Football, I think he got banged up. He left the game. In comes Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield never lost a job. That could potentially happen to Tyrod Taylor here, if he struggles or if he unfortunately gets hurt. But Justin Herbert, he was really prolific last season for Oregon. He obviously took him to the Rose Bowl. He won the Pac-12, got them to the Pac-12 title game. They killed Utah, and then they go to the Rose Bowl and they beat Wisconsin. A really tough Big Ten team, and he played really good. He didn't have too many mistakes in that game. He looked poised, and looking at his numbers last year, he had a completion percentage of 67%, which is pretty good. Obviously in college you see a lot more short passes. Not really. You do go deep, but he was really good. He had over 3,400 passing yards and 32 touchdowns to only 6 picks. So, he definitely has that quarterback aura. He's shown he could get it done, and Chargers believe in him. Obviously they would have drafted probably Tua or Joe Burrow if they fell to him, but obviously that didn't happen. But I watched a lot of Justin Herbert during his days at Oregon, and he definitely has the size, the look to be an NFL QB. And I think when the brights were lightest, against SC, SC isn't what it used to be. They don't have that defense they had before. He played great against them where they were down. He brought them back. He did the same, obviously, in the Rose Bowl. They were down to Wisconsin. He brought them back. So, and if you watch Hard Knocks, he looks cool and calm. I think now they're really just trying to groom him So, once they need him to go in, he'll be ready. And, if you look at the Chargers, they have plenty of weapons, to help them, starting with Austin Eckler, Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. So, he just needs some time right now, but eventually he's going to be, their savior.
I mean, I definitely would say their savior, because I know Phillip Rivers was starting to fall off of the map as well for the Chargers, and I think it was time for the Chargers to get a new quarterback. So I think Justin Herbert, that's a great selection for the Chargers, just especially what Herbert did for Oregon. He has a bright future with them. Do you know more or less the timetable that we should be expecting him to be coming on the field and finally being a QB?
I would probably say, I barring an injury, I think Tyrod Taylor is going to be the quarterback this season, through and through. When he was a starter in Buffalo, he broke Buffalo. They had a long streak of not making the playoffs. I think it was almost 20 years or over 20 years. I'll have to recheck that later. But when he was a starting quarterback for Buffalo, he was solid. He was a top 10 fantasy quarterback each year. The year he took them to the playoffs, I believe it was 2017. I remember he lost the job to Peterman, but then Nathan Peterman, he threw like 5 picks against the Chargers, and then that was it. They put Tyrod Taylor back in, and he was solid. He had a 63% completion percentage. He threw for, 2,800 yards, 14 touchdowns. He obviously provides that rushing factor. He's not going to make too many mistakes. There might be times where you want more out of him. You want him to take more risk. He's not Phillip Rivers. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to throw as many picks. The year he started 14 games for the Bills, he only had 4 picks. He never had one year where he threw, more than 7 picks. And obviously Phillip Rivers, granted, Chargers offensive line wasn't that great last year. They lost Mike Pouncey at the beginning of the year. They upgraded that this year. But, I really expect Tyrod Taylor to have a pretty solid year. And he's not really going to have to do much. They have a really good team. Based off of what the Chargers did with their offensive line, I think Tyrod Taylor is going to have a really solid year.
So one thing I forgot to mention to you, Will, the Chargers finishing up dead last in the AFC West, right behind the Raiders. The Raiders finished up in 3rd in that division. So, I mean, the Raiders did better than the Chargers. I definitely think the Chargers, they have to address that, and they got to finish on top of the Raiders. And I think Tyrod Taylor will definitely be a good option for the Chargers. Like you said, if the offensive line could give him some time, he's got a lot of weapons. He's got a lot of tools to be able to help him out. And as far as offensively, I think the Chargers will be pretty well set. How about the defense? I was reading up that this is Joey Bosa's contract year. Do we see him re-signing with the Chargers? Do we see the Chargers potentially extending him?
Yeah, well, to answer your question, yeah, they already re-signed him. They re-signed him, I believe, a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, right at the beginning of training camp, really. They gave him, I believe, 3-year contract, 4-year contract, over $100 million, man, the highest paid pass rusher, I believe. So he already got paid, and the Chargers invested in him, which I think is a really smart move. Bosa, he had his injuries. He's a really massive dude. Really nice guy. He doesn't like talking to the media, but like when he talks to you, he's really nice. Really nice guy, and he's an animal. He's, I think, for sure better than his brother Nick. I think his brother Nick Bosa for San Francisco had a really monster year last year because, the Niners had a monster D line. But Joey Bosa he's a beast. He's a man, and he's really good. They have Melvin Ingram on the other side, who, he's on his final year, but they've restructured his deal, which is good. So he got his money that he wanted. Their D line is solid. Those two guys, they have some guys in the middle, Isaac Rochelle, and they picked up Lival Joseph. So they have a really solid front seven. Linebacker, they have Denzel Perryman, who was solid last year, Denzel Tranquil. They have decent solid linebackers, but their secondary, although they did lose Derwin James, who had a torn meniscus a couple of weeks ago. So that's a huge loss. But unfortunately, he's been hurt a lot. But when he's on the field, he's one of the more talented players in the NFL. But they still have good, quarterbacks with they obviously added Chris Harris Jr., who was, stalwart for the Broncos defense for the last 5 years. They have Casey Hayward on the other side, and they have some decent safeties. So the Chargers defense is solid. I think and they were one of the better they held Mahomes in that game in Mexico City. They pretty much kept Mahomes in check. Just Phillip Rivers had like 5 picks in that game. Like, Phillip Rivers, unfortunately, he really lost in that game. He kept him in it, but then like he really, wet the bed, at the worst moments. But the Chargers defense should be pretty solid. And just to mention their offensive line, they've really invested in it. Bringing in Brian Bulaga, they added Trey Turner, who was really good for the Panthers. They traded Russell Okung away for Trey Turner, but Turner is definitely, I think, a better lineman right now than Okung. And Bulaga has been a solid veteran for the Packers for so many years. So you have Austin Eckler and you have Joshua Kelly. Eckler should have another monster year, I'm hoping, fantasy wise. But he they re-signed him. They gave him a nice deal considering he was a guy who he was on the practice squad. He was just one of the guys they brought in as a rookie free agent. During training camp, he made a roster, and now he eventually ended up winning the job. So Chargers have a pretty solid team. Their defense should be solid, but the loss of Derwin James should affect them. But again, they play in a really good division. With the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. The Broncos aren't as great, but they're still going to be tough. Obviously, Melvin Gordon, Philip Lindsay, they have good receivers. And even the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to be one of the more surprising teams this year. Even though I'm not a huge fan of Derek Carr, he's still solid. And Josh Jacobs is a beast. Like I really like Josh Jacobs. So it's not going to be easy, for the Chargers. They have somewhat of a tough schedule, in their first 8 games. They face the Saints week 5. They face the Bucs week 4. But, the rest of it is relatively easy. But, the Chargers definitely have a good opportunity to, at least make the playoffs.
So, Will, with that being said, where do you expect the Chargers to finish up? Is it going to be another tough season and be in third or even last? Or do you think they could get a run for their money and maybe be up there with the Broncos and even potentially with the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think they definitely have the team to make a wild card. I think being the Chiefs is going to be tough just because they're loaded. And unless Patrick Mahomes gets hurt, they're going to be up there. And they're probably going to run away with the division just because they're so good. But I definitely think the Chargers have what it takes to, make a wild card. And I want to say they added more wild card teams this year, because of COVID. But I'm not too sure. I'll have to look that up later. But, the Chargers definitely have the team to, to make a wild card. I definitely have faith in Tyrod Taylor. I think he's going to be solid. And if their defense can hold up, if they could, avoid any drastic injuries, Chargers definitely should be around 11-5, 10-6, 9-7, because their schedule really lightens up after the first 8 games. They play the Broncos, who I don't have too much faith in. They lost Von Miller on defense. Drew Lock, I'm not totally convinced he's, a franchise player. Even though he's solid, they do play the Patriots week 13, which I think will be tough. It's always tough. Bill Belichick is still there. I think Cam Newton's going to surprise some people. The Falcons week 14, that could be tough just because of their offense. And, they finished the season with the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's going to be, if they could beat the teams they should be in the playoffs. How far they will go, you know, I don't think they're I don't think they're Super Bowl bound. Let's just say that. You know, having to beat the Chiefs, that's going to be really tough. Having to beat the Ravens, that's going to be tough. I think the Steelers are going to be in there again. They have a really good defense and Big Ben's back. So yeah, we shall see, my friend. But if you want a prediction, I'm going to say 10-6.
10-6. Okay, I could see more or less of that. I think I do see them having an above 500 record. 9-7 is where I'm going to go for them. I do see them finishing behind the Chiefs. They're going to go from dead last. They're going to go to second. They won't beat out the Chiefs. That's for sure. They're an unstoppable team. They are the new number one team in the NFL. And I do think that the Chargers do have what it takes to beat the Broncos and the Raiders, but they will definitely have to play an excellent, no mistakes against the Chiefs if they expect to beat them. But Chargers, I expect them to have a good year. And even if they do even finish above 500, whether they go into playoffs or not, that's still an improvement. You finished above 500, that's an improvement from last season. And just to be even in the wild card, to be able to play some additional football, that's pretty good too, some playoff football. So I think that'll be some good competition for the Chargers. I think that's a good goal for them to achieve, to at least qualify for even a wild card. I think that would be a good goal for them. So my final question to you, Will, is Chargers great Antonio Gates. He announced his retirement back in, I believe, January, February. How do you think that the Chargers are going to replace this great?
Well, you know, he didn't play last year. There were some rumors last year that he was, you know, I remember when Hunter Henry got hurt, and some of the beat reporters, at the time I was covering the Chargers. I was going like almost every week to shoot, you know, press conference practice, and I remember some of the beat reporters saying, you know, Antonio Gates, you know, Gates is going to come back. There were kind of some whispers, but that never came to fruition. You know, I remember Anthony Lynn was like, no, we're going to, you know, they hadn't spoken to him at all. I remember Phillip Rivers, you know, that him and Antonio Gates, they were, you know, they were like bread and butter. You know, they had a great relationship on the field, off the field. So him not having Gates there last year at all was kind of weird. And it was kind of weird because I feel like Phillip Rivers definitely felt probably like around December that it was going to be his last year with the Bolts. And you could see it in his face, just the way he carried himself. I remember the final, like, okay, after the season ended, after regular season ended, when they had to go and clean out their lockers and get all their stuff, I remember Phillip Rivers didn't talk to the media. So, you know, he had kind of given like a long post-game speech though after they lost, I think the last game. I think he kind of cried too. But he didn't talk to the media. I guess that was his farewell. And obviously he's with the Colts now. But, you know, obviously Gates, he's been gone. They have Hunter Henry. I think Hunter Henry is a stud if he stays healthy. They have really good receivers. You know, I think they'll be okay there. For me, I think the bigger question is how they're going to respond to not having Phillip Rivers. And you've seen a little bit of that in Hard Knocks. You know, how they're you know, carrying themselves. It looks like everybody's buying into, you know, Tyrod Taylor. So you know, I think they'll be okay, but you know, that's going to be interesting to see. You know, and unfortunately, the Chargers do not play the Colts this year. That would have been really fun to watch.
That would have been nice.
Yeah, but I think Phillip Rivers will have a really nice bounce back year for, you know, for the Colts, because they're a team that is loaded, you know, on offense and defense.
So it'll be interesting to see how Phillip Rivers will do with his new team, new uniform, and definitely a whole new offense for him to work with and a lot of weapons to work with over there in Indianapolis. And then it's also going to be interesting to see how these two LA teams, the Rams and the Chargers, see if they could both get over this non-playoff slump that they've been going through these last season or two for these teams. Just, I would say, keep an eye out on them. And for all of you Rams and Chargers fans, watch SoFi Stadium from the TV. I'm sure they're going to have coverage of the whole entire build, and they're going to have some sort of feature. So just be on the lookout for that. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please give the video a thumbs up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. We're around the corner from 200 subscribers, guys. We're only going up from here. And of course, thank you so much to the guest for today, Will Hernandez. He works for CBSLA, covers both the Rams and the Chargers, sports journalist. Thank you so much, Will. It was an absolute pleasure. Had a good time having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. I'm looking forward to next time, talking some football, some Rams, Chargers, and great time, Hopefully everybody has a good week 1 fantasy and, however else you intake your football. But, thank you for having me on, Alex.
It was a pleasure, Will. And you know what? If any of these teams end up going to the playoffs, you know who I'm calling. You know where your spot is here in Sideline Sports Podcast. So be on the lookout for that, for these two teams to be in the playoffs. But I'm Alex Naveja, the host of Sideline Sports Podcast, signing off to this one. And of course, if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, the source of all your SoCal sports. Have a good one, everybody, and make sure to stay safe and enjoy week 1 of the NFL season.